And we are here today for yet another Ahsoka discussion show. That is where I myself, Mike Burton of Star Wars Comics in Canon and Comics in Motion and Genuine Chit-Chat and just a Star Wars lover, I speak to a different guest each episode and we discuss the live-action Ahsoka series. I say the live-action Ahsoka series because some would argue the Clone Wars is the Ahsoka series, and then also she pops up in Rebels as well. So lots of things and stuff, but I've consumed the majority of Star Wars content, read every canon comic that's in the Marvel runs, and quite a few Dark Horse IDW ones. I've read a lot of books. I've read every single piece of High Republic content. I've played quite a few of the games, and I have a limited but slowly expanding Legends knowledge. But I do not know everything. I always want to preface that because people seem to think I do know everything about Star Wars, and I certainly do not. But on this journey, I like to speak with different people each episode and try and get different perspectives on basically the live action shows. Everyone's got different thoughts. Some people like it more or less or whatever. And along the way, I like to try and give a little bit of extra information on things where I can, just from my knowledge. And joining me today is a gentleman who has done a lot of Star Wars content recently because of me. Myself and Dave Horrocks of Comics in Motion basically forced this poor gentleman into delving headfirst into the Star Wars universe. He showed a smidge of interest with coming on, I think, the Andor discussion shows and really saving them in certain ways because he stood in for a couple of people who couldn't attend just because of scheduling things or personal matters, which is completely fine. But I'm speaking about Maff. Not only did he jump in on the Andor discussion shows for loads of times, which can be found on this YouTube channel or on the feed of Comics in Motion if you're listening to this, but also he and I, with Dave, embarked on Rebels Reviewed, where we watched all 4 series of Star Wars Rebels, did an episode per series, then we did a 5th episode as a roundup kind of thing. So Maff has very recently, we're talking weeks before the premiere of Ahsoka, finished Rebels for the first time. So I'm very jealous that you got to experience that. And also it's kind of like, well, I subtly timed it very well. So Maff, how are you doing? It's a 3-pronged question. How are you doing? Are you glad that that you managed to watch Rebels before Ahsoka? And also, what did you think of the first 2 episodes of Ahsoka? And also, happy birthday. I said that before, but I thought people will see that your camera quality is so much better than mine now. So you're slowly going up in the world. But enough from me. Maff, tell us about you.
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me on here. Dave said it before. I was just so lucky how it's all put into place. The fact that we finished Rebels and then the Ahsoka came out like a couple of weeks later. And it's like kind of what's been said before. It feels like a continuing story from Rebels to season 5. Well, the first 2 episodes of season 5.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of moving up on its own way now. But like I say, I was just so fortunate. You did mention that last week about if someone hadn't watched them, and unfortunately I'm here now, so you have to wait till next week and see if there's someone who hasn't seen the Rebels, which really should do. But I feel that having watched it all, it helped, but I don't think it was really essential. Mm-hmm. I think you could probably have worked out kind of you wouldn't have that same kind of feelings to certain characters, but I think you will be able to pick up. I think watching Rebels does make a bit of an issue of episode 1 and 2 because there was parts where I felt it dragged on because I'm like, I know this character, just get on with it. And I think that's the bit where Dave Filoni is like, people who haven't watched Rebels, let's try kind of flesh this character out a bit more. So a bit biased there. I think they could have pushed it on a bit quicker, but all in all, fantastic so far. And I just feel like it's just worked so well for me that it's just kind of continued on, and I can't wait for the next episode.
Well, it's also, we decided when we discussed Andor, that's where kind of the idea of Rebels Reviewed got birthed. And then I heard a lot of rumours and thoughts that there was going to be a lot of connections to Ahsoka. So part of that was one of the reasons I wanted to push us to make sure we got it all done before Ahsoka. But there was the debate of whether or not we should have shown you Clone Wars first or should have shown you Rebels. And obviously, as of recording this, you haven't seen Clone Wars. I think the loose idea is once Ahsoka's all finished, we'll then start our Clone Wars rewatch, name pending. We were discussing some fun double C puns in the Discord, trying to figure out what we should call it. But there's the Clone Wars movie, and then there's 7 seasons of the Clone Wars. And then there's also something called Tales of the Jedi, and then following that there's also the Bad Batch, which there's going to be 3 seasons of as of next year. So there's a lot of other content and things. But I'm so glad we got you to watch Rebels, because if anyone's listening and they haven't watched Clone Wars or Rebels, I know a lot of people are diving into Clone Wars first. And I would argue against that. I'd say watch Rebels first. I mean, with the live action stuff, you know that Ahsoka survives. Like, we're talking about the Ahsoka series, and for just to remind people, it's set around 5-ish years after Return of the Jedi, which is around 9 years after, altogether, which is around 9 years after A New Hope, which is approximately 10 years after season 4 of Star Wars Rebels, excluding the epilogue, which we saw in episode 2. So the general timeline is, we know Ahsoka's alive. It's been decades since the Clone Wars, but it's one of those things where the Clone Wars series does a lot for the prequels, which obviously I love, and also does a lot for putting Ahsoka as a character on the map. But when you watch Rebels, you've kind of jumped over all of that stuff, and you're kind of at her more so halfway through her journey, it seems, or maybe even towards the end, depending on your theories. But what you see in Clone Wars, at least so far in Ahsoka, there's been the odd mention. I think in the prior episode, me and Dave mentioned the Night Sisters, which are quite prominent in a few arcs of Clone Wars. But as you've played Jedi Fallen Order, that really goes into most of what, apart from like a few more specific details. If you've played Fallen Order, you know what happened to the Dathomiri Night Sisters, because Merrin mentions it constantly, understandably, because it's a horrendously traumatic thing, but you don't need that. Whereas I think that with Rebels, where all the cast are basically from Rebels, there's a lot more nods to Rebels. The plot, Rebels is closer chronologically to Ahsoka than it is. So it's a wide thing. It's a wide net. So I'd say watch Rebels. But you very briefly mentioned your enjoyment of episodes 1 and 2 of Ahsoka, but tell us a little bit more about them. And also, I think you may have had a question as well.
Yes. Well, first, I love the way it started. Dave mentioned it. We got the scroll, the crawl coming up and that, then the ship coming down. It kind of gave you that Star Wars. It gives you that tingles of, oh, we're back here again. And it was just exciting to get. And so far, I felt as a series, it's harking back to a lot of them Star Wars feels. But in a good way, not trying to be cheesy and trying to be Easter egg, just kind of give you certain feels of, this is Star Wars. This is what I want. You mentioned about the droids last week and saying you weren't sure where the droids were coming from. Now, I may have misunderstood which droids you want about, because I don't know if you want about the assassin droids, which blow up, or whether you want about the one that was in Ezra's tower.
Because I see.
They did say they were from
Corellia. Yeah, that's where Han Solo is from.
Corellia.
Yeah, so the Corellian shipyards. Yeah, it was mainly I was kind of thinking out loud of where do they come from as in who sent them. And I think it's been addressed specifically that it was Morgan Elsbeth, and it seemingly, or at least they came from the Corellian shipyards. There's someone in the Empire that's sending them. But I was kind of thinking, like, in the comics, and I think I said in the episode, I'm fairly certain it's not this, because it's a bit of a deep cut, but in the comics, especially in the Darth Vader comics, the 2020 run, written by Greg Pak, which supports a lot of the sequel trilogy that as a comic series. It has Ochief Bestoon in it and a few other things. They go to Exegol. It's very cool. But in that, there's something called the Droid Crush, and they started appearing in the comics quite a lot. And it's basically this, or the Droid Crush, and also I think they're known as the Droid Gotra, and they're basically this collection of like droid pirates, essentially. That are kind of, some of them are assassins, some of them are this, some of them are that. But it's kind of like it's like a crime syndicate, but of droids. And that they looked a bit like that, and I wondered, that would be interesting. I was pretty uncertain they didn't do that, but that was kind of what I was umming and ahhing about. More so, sometimes I say things on these podcasts, and it's more so just so if it does turn out to be correct, I can say I told you so. Not to you specifically, but to the world. Because occasionally I have Star Wars theories and don't tell anyone, then it happens, and I'm like, could have got internet points for that.
Yeah, I mean, when there was on the planet and looking at all the shipyards, I was desperately looking out for Cal Kestis and thinking, is he there? Is it, is there going to be an Easter egg of him just, walking past? But I didn't spot him. Don't mean to say he wasn't there, but I didn't spot him. But the question I was going to ask, does Ahsoka have one lightsaber shorter than the other?
Yes, she does. It's called a Shoto lightsaber.
So it's like a parry blade.
Yeah, basically, so there's something called a Shoto lightsaber in Star Wars, and Yoda uses it. Uses one. So does Eve NPL, who is a character you'll meet in the Clone Wars, but you do see him in Phantom Menace briefly. Basically, it's just a tiny lightsaber. It's because Shoto blades in the Eastern culture, I think Japanese, when you've got a Shoto blade, it's just a smaller... I think a katana is sort of a longer one. Shoto is a shorter one. I haven't looked into that, friends. I just know the term Shoto loosely. So if I am getting the Japanese culture wrong, I apologize. Please do research on that before assuming things and telling your friends you know everything about Shoto. But in lightsabers, Shoto is shorter. Standard is standard, I guess. And usually people find that when you're dual wielding, it's better to have a slightly shorter blade when it comes to the lightsaber forms, because as you say, one's better for parrying, or it increases like your range. It also means the blades have got their own, you've kind of got a different arc to it and things. So short answer is yes, you're right.
It's what I thought. I was kind of looking, thinking, am I right? Am I wrong? It would make sense because she's dual wielding, but it was like, I don't know for definite. It's smart written down. I did get, and I didn't kind of feel this in Rebels, the bit when she kind of drops down and we see the father, the sister, and the brother. I felt Fifth Element vibes there. Very kind of, that's how it felt to me when she brought up the pedestal, and we got like the rock there, and then it turned into the star map. I did kind of feel, this is a lot like Fifth Element.
That's
so I don't know whether that's maybe he's taking a bit of inspiration there, but the first two episodes did just feel, I felt there were parts that dragged, but I think that's because I kind of thought, come on, I know what's going on.
Yeah, we're ready. We're like, come on, let's just get the plot moving.
Yeah, they could have quite easily done them 2 episodes as one episode and just maybe, a little bit longer as just one episode. But, I'm not criticising too much because I love it and I want him to keep making more. But then we get into episode 3 and I felt this is where it's gone right. We've set you in. Now we're going to kind of go, we're still going to have these characters. He's still going to have certain feels. There's a great person who turns up in it and I went, oh, that's such and such. And I was frustrated when we see Jason. He got mentioned, and I thought, oh, great, they've done a little nod for him. And then we see him.
Yeah.
With Chop, and I thought, oh, brilliant. But then I got frustrated there because I know we're jumping around. He mentions about Sabine becoming a Jedi. I think that could have been a perfect point for her to mention his dad. And that something, just a little nod, a little something, and that. And I think it was a missed opportunity that, unless they're going to mention him further down the line in a better way, that could have been, well, that's what your dad was, kind of thing. But then maybe she's not told him much about his dad.
We don't know
if there is a story. Maybe there's a comic book there. I don't know.
There's actually, and I've not read these novels, so I only know this from other YouTubers and what people have told me in the small amount of research I've done. But essentially, between Rebels and Ahsoka, there's only 4 pieces of content where... There's only 5 pieces of content where Hera appears. So one of them is comics. I'm saying comics as a general term because she appears in a couple of issues. She is in a Dr. Aphra, a run of those where she appears and Aphra takes her hostage and stuff. That's between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. At that point, she's basically, during the Galactic Civil War, she's simultaneously raising her son, Jason, and then also is training up pilots. That's her main thing. It's a way, I believe, that she can, not be in any danger for her son, but also she's one of the best pilots in the galaxy. Definitely the best pilot in the Rebellion, I'd say. Her and Wedge are probably, I'd say, the 2 best. But, she needs to train these new people so the Rebellion can keep fighting and things. So you've got those. Then you've got the Squadrons game, which I'm currently playing.
Yeah.
Which I haven't finished, but I'm currently playing and she's just popped up. And so I know, and that's set after episode 6. So that's, before the Ahsoka series, but quite fresh after Return of the Jedi and things. So it's like seeing what happened there and what she's kind of doing there. It's more of the same sort of stuff. And then the main place that she's popped up that the content that I specifically haven't consumed is the Alphabet Squadron novels. So there's a trilogy of novels, and I've just not read them. They're basically, as much as I like Star Wars stuff, like ships firing and shooting on each other, it's my probably least favorite part about Star Wars, probably because for me, when there's a lot of other sci-fi things like Star Trek comes to mind, that there's a lot of ship battles, and especially when I read it in a book, I do often find it hard to visualize when there's a space battle going on and there's a ship moving in a 3D space, spinning and moving around with about 50 other things going on, all shooting at each other and stuff. And it's like, it's not that I can't follow it fully, but I find it harder to follow. So I've not prioritized those books. I know she's in that and she passively mentions Jacen, but not really. I'm fairly certain she doesn't mention Kanan in them at all. So really, apart outside of Rebels, she doesn't mention Kanan, apart from A New Dawn, the prequel book. But the thing is that what I think, and I think I said this in the last episode, but I can't remember. I think the reason they're not really mentioning Kanan, and it may change as the episodes go on, but I think the reason they're not mentioning him is because a lot of people who haven't seen Rebels, it would spoil it for them in a sense.
Yeah, I suppose.
You could predict what's happening, because when the whole cast of someone, show up in Ahsoka, minus one character, well, technically minus two characters at the point, but we saw Zeb in Mandalorian, so we know he's about. So it's like when the whole cast appear by one person, you're either like, oh, they're going to pop in and do some sort of big entrance, or they're dead. It's only one of two things. And so I assume people would know that, but I don't know, because I feel like Filoni really wants more people to watch Rebels, which he should, because Rebels is phenomenal. But
and if he spoils it by going, it's
or
even though
I
said, I knew what was going to happen to Kanan. I kind of guessed as Star Wars tropes, and it's like you can see, especially that episode, you can see what's going to happen. But I suppose if you're going into Rebels, you don't have any knowledge. You think, well, he's not in Ahsoka, and they kind of mention what's happened to him in Ahsoka, then it could spoil it. So I do understand that. I have maybe spoiling little things by not watching Clone Wars before watching Ahsoka, but there was no chance I was going to be able to watch 8 seasons of plus a movie. That it's not going to happen. But there's little nods. I mean, she briefly did mention him in the bit when she's talking to the council. She does say there's people that we lost, people who are family that we loved. So he's kind of mentioned there because we know of it. But it's I think I'm just waiting for that little kind of nugget where they just kind of mention something about it. He deserves it, really does.
I would love your theory that we discussed in Rebels, that if we got a Force ghost of Kanan and he talks to Sabine and Ahsoka, like that, it would melt me. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I've got a question about, but I don't know if you want to. Do you want to kind of go to
There's no
episode, or do you want me to
No. We can dot around. It's fine.
Right. So to become a Jedi, and that, I doing my thinking in the shower like I do. I was thinking to become a Jedi, you need to use the Force, but then I thought, well, do you need to use the Force? But then there's the way that the Jedi see it, that the Force is everywhere. Everyone, is made of the Force, and then they kind of address it in this episode when Ahsoka says to Sabine, the Force is in you. It's just it's not as potent as other people. Has there ever been a Jedi who hasn't used the Force?
In canon, not to my knowledge. I don't think so in Legends either. I think there's a line from Luke in the Rise of Kylo Ren comics, which are phenomenal. There's a 4-part miniseries, and he basically says that the Force is like a door. And when you are Force sensitive, or more Force sensitive than someone else, your door is just slightly more open than it is for someone else, but it still takes a lot of effort to walk through that door. And I know that Obi-Wan Kenobi, for example, he was noted as being incredibly average. If anything, he was actually below average in the majority of his classes up to a point. So a lot of people weren't even sure that he would even get a master or even be promoted to Jedi Knight, finish his trials and things. So it is different per person, but I think is what the new canon is trying to do, which I personally really like, is trying to make more grey areas and trying to have a lot more different varieties of Force user. Now, I know in Legends there were tons of Force users. I'm not saying at the moment in canon there are more than in Legends, but I think it's trying to be more like where this is going is being like, you can be Force sensitive, but you don't have to follow this dogmatic creed. One example I give is Maz Kanata. She's probably my favorite Force sensitive character I really like. She's the short orange individual who's over 1,000 years old, who's in the sequel trilogy.
Yes.
And she's on Takodana, and she can feel the Force. She is Force sensitive fully, but she can't. In a deleted scene, she could, but I think so far as we know in canon, she can't actively use the Force in a sense of she can't Force push or leap 20 meters in the air or things like that. But she can feel the Force. She can do certain things, and I think that's what Sabine's leaning on. I think that you're right in the way that the Jedi kind of view it. I think that one of the things that the prequels really illustrates, and what is echoed in The Last Jedi and then further in these shows, is that the Jedi were trying to be good, but they became such an institution that actually their own rules and dogma hurt their own impact in the galaxy. And that's one of the reasons why the prequels happen. You'll see in the Clone Wars when we watch those, how often what's right for the war effort or what resources are good for the Republic outweighing what is a morally good decision. Some of those things start to get very messy in the Clone Wars, and it leads to certain questionable decisions by the Jedi Order and also by Anakin as well, which kind of bleeds more into Revenge of the Sith. But yeah, obviously there is the whole midichlorian thing, which a lot of people don't like. I personally am not a fan of it either overly. It didn't bother me as much as others, but I think that the Jedi, especially in the prequel era, were a lot more like, if you can't do X, Y, Z, you can't be a part of our club. And then you can kind of go off to do other things.
But it's that thing of like Cal Kestis, he blocked himself off from the Force, and then he had to relearn. Luke in Last Jedi?
Yeah.
When he kind of came, he was kind of a bit like trying to find his way back a bit. So maybe it's a case of, like you say, it's just opening that door, finding that way to kind of connect again. Hu Yang does mention a nice thing, which is a nice little nod when he mentions that she's not your standard Jedi, but you're not the standard Jedi, and never was your master, kind of thing. So it was the kind of thing, you can train her because you were trained weird. Your previous master was trained weird. Look how you both turned out. And so it kind of it's like a band of misfits. It just kind of worked. And I was a bit against whether she should become like a bad one, but the more I see it, the way it's laying out, I feel it's fitting, because they're not like going, oh, great, she can now force choke and she can force push and she can, jump the cavern like, Kanan did. She's struggling, but she does have a little bit of an upper hand. Part of that is a training from being a Mandalore. They do mention Mandalores being Jedi Knights before. So I thought, she's obviously not going to be the first one. But I think it's a nice, because with Ezra, in a way, he was a bit of a misfit. And then obviously he grew into what he became. I feel that Sabine, it's like when Jason says, it's Sabine going to become a Jedi. And it's that excitement, that kind of thing. But yeah, maybe she could be. Maybe she could go down this path. Maybe she doesn't need to be Force sensitive in the same way. Maybe she can still rely on them beliefs of, I'm going to stand up and do what's right. It doesn't matter if I don't have all these Force powers and be able to do that. I can still stand up and do the right thing. So it's more than just having the use of the Force. It's standing up for what's, what you believe in. So if that's the kind of angle that Dave Filoni's going for, I think it's going to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also think that from a storytelling perspective, where you've got Mandalorians aren't a race of people, it's a creed, and when you've got the Jedi as a belief system, it becomes more of a thing where you can kind of curmudgeon certain characters or things happening. They're like, oh, they're a Jedi. It's like, are they really? It's like, well, kind of. And it's like, it doesn't have to be so specific. So I do agree that I was in the same sort of camp, that I'm still not overly a fan of Sabine being force sensitive. You know, I'm just like, Luke and Rey were big deals. And if you're like, well, we've got Ezra somewhere, and Sabine might be, and also Ahsoka's about, and Cal Kestis might be too, and this, and that, and you're like, okay, how many Jedi are there? Like, I know the argument, and I've made this argument against myself, which is there were 10,000 odd Jedi around the prequels, Order 66 wiped out, let's say, 99% of them. There's still 100 left. In the Vader comics in 2017, and other bits and pieces of Star Wars content, there is, you know, a decent chunk of them were killed, let's say half by the Inquisitors, if not slightly more, but you've still got, like, even if you're very cutthroat with it, you've still got 20, 30 odd Jedi left. And it's even like in Jedi Survivor, no spoilers because I've not even finished it myself, I'm going to finish Squadrons and go back to it, but with Jedi Survivor, you know, in that, very minor spoilers, but it's just at the start of the game, basically, Sia Junda's about, she's a Jedi, Eno Cordova's about, he's a Jedi, and you're just like, oh, which I'm cool. I like seeing more characters.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
They may die by the end of I have a theory they're going to, at least Eno Cordova's going to die by the end, but I have not played the game enough to know that. But it's just one of those things where it's more and more Jedi coming, and I'm like, if I want loads of Jedi, I kind of want it post-Episode 9 or pre-Episode 1, which they are going to be doing. In the time of the Galactic Civil War, they just keep kind of pushing more in, which I'm not as much a fan of, but I do like, as you say, you know, they're trying to make it so that Sabine is maybe not going to be a conventional Jedi, which I do like. And there's one thing that Dave forgot to mention in the prior episode, and then we discussed it after recording, so I'm just going to add that in there. I should have said at the start, but I didn't. It was that he mentioned the music he really liked, and it reminded him a little bit, especially the ending credits of Game of Thrones and things, which I thought was a nice little nod. So if we kind of, on this episode specifically, so part 3, Time to Fly, it's the shortest episode thus far, only including credits and recap and all that jazz, 36 minutes. So it was really only about half an hour long, whereas the other ones were obviously nearly an hour and about 40 minutes. So you've got like a lot of it is about training with Sabine and Ahsoka, which I do like and was interesting, get more Hu Yang dialogue. And then you've got the stuff with Hera and trying to convince the New Republic Council or the Senate Council, Mon Mothma, and a handful of other individuals that I'll delve into in a moment. They trying to convince them that there's a threat rising and we need to kind of go and sort this out. And then basically trying to say, well, it's just Ezra that you're fussed about. It's actually, you know, it's not really Thrawn, it's Ezra, and you're getting emotional about this. And I said the last episode, but I'm so... the New Republic really is crap. I knew it was somewhat because there's a book called Bloodline by Claudia Gray. It's really interesting. It's set only maybe a decade before The Force Awakens, I think, or so. And it's really showing how the First Order did start to fester under the like political landscape to a degree. But when you see things like this, you're just like, man, I would... If I was Hera, I know in a professional setting you just can't, especially not when you're in government and things. But I'd find it so hard to hold my tongue. And I know she has a couple of zingers in there, which I really like. You know, like, oh, you didn't fight in the war, did you, Senator? You just kind of stood back and waited to see who won. And he was just completely quiet. And that was Xiono, who is, I've got more to say about him. But what did you think about Hera and the New Republic and all that sort of that element of this episode?
Just going back a little bit. The intro, the bit where they show Vader's mask, Boba Fett's mask, Marrok's mask is featured in there. Mm-hmm. So I do wonder, he's kind of popping up a little bit more. I know there's a lot of theories out there, which we can discuss further down the line, but I just wonder whether, again, is that a bit of a red herring? We're going to throw his face in here and then kind of, you know, just because a lot of people, it wasn't there last week, but it was there this week, which I thought was strange. Or I didn't notice it last week anyway.
I don't think you noticed it, if I'm honest.
Right.
Because I don't think they changed those things. I'd have to double check, but I'm fairly certain it's that per series. Because I always try, when I watch it with Megan, I'm always like, right, go. And then I'll try and name them all as they come up. Just to test myself. And when Marek came up, I was like, I have no idea what the hell that is.
All right, well, maybe I just didn't notice it. Was that a temple guard mask, or was that just a training mask that Sabine wore when she couldn't see anything?
Yeah, it was. I think it was just to me, it looked like a flight suit mask. Maybe like it's weird when they get those masks out because I'm like, what use is a visor that covers your whole face? But I'm not sure what that was. It could be an old Jedi training one. It could be anything, but it wasn't something I recognized, and it didn't look like the Jedi Temple Guard. So I would be inclined to think it wasn't one of those.
Right, because I knew it wasn't like the mask that Canon wore, but I was just thinking back to the episode when he meets the Grand Inquisitor. I'm thinking there was a lot of masks on the wall, and I don't know, it just stood out. Again, I'll probably have to go back and look and just try, and then I'll message you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it felt that kind of from episode 4 with Luke putting the mask on, and that's kind of what she was doing. But it was. Which means Sabine would react after she'd already been killed. One of those things of like, Ahsoka just lightly touches her and it's like, yeah, but you'd have been dead now. So, it's all right doing all this fancy footwork. But it's an interesting line that they're kind of going down there where she actually got better the more angry she got. But then obviously she lost her balance. So, again, we saw that with Ezra. There's that fighting torment of, trying to keep it calm to be able to kind of do what you need to do and not just take the shortcut. But yeah, I enjoyed that. Going on to, here we're going to speak to the council. I love the fact that they mentioned Jason. She's like, yeah, he's probably running around with chopper somewhere, causing mischief. And so, great little nod. And then we get to see him, and they're like, even better. We've sent to Xiono. When she kind of she does have a really good dig at him, and I kind of thought, are they kind of trying to make him look like the bad guy, like the kind of maybe he's working for the Empire, he's working for he's behind the scenes. He's trying to do his or is he just scared? Because people make rash decisions. People try hide away from war because they don't want to be in a war. He doesn't want his people. He doesn't want to be put in that situation. If he can just, deny all knowledge of it and just say, it's all in your head. It's nothing to do with Thrawn's not coming back. Don't worry about it. We've got a big council of people doing nothing. So we'll just dismiss that. I first thought is he going to be the general bad guy kind of thing behind the scenes where he's one of these henchmen who were trying to push a certain way, but then I think he was more scared when they mentioned Thrawn. You see the look on their faces of, no, she can't mention that name. That he's dead. He can't be around. They all looked quite nervous and scared. And it's that kind of thing of, if we just pretend he's not here, he's not going to come back. So, again, is it a red herring? Is it a kind of, we're going to paint him as a bit of a bad guy, and Hera's going to have a bit of a dig at him so that he does kind of shovel himself back. But, again, if I were in that situation, I'd be kind of thinking, I get it. This guy is bad. We know he's bad. We don't want to do it. If we don't talk about him, he may not come back.
Was denial.
Again, yeah, denial it all. And then when it does turn up, well, we didn't know.
Oh, yeah, where it's classic political move. But it's interesting because in the Heir to the Empire books, which I've only recently... I've finished them before the Ahsoka series. And then there's the Canon Thrawn novels and other stuff. And all the Thrawn novels I read so far are really good. But the Heir to the Empire books, in that, there are parts where Leia, Luke, Han, they're all trying to convince the New Republic. They're being like, look, there's this threat out there, the Grand Admiral Thrawn. And they're like, there's no Grand Admiral Thrawn. We've checked through Imperial records. There's only like 11 Grand Moffs or Grand Admirals. There's not 12, there's only 10 of them. There's not 11. And then they're like, well, we've met him and seen him, and he's not on the books because someone probably erased it. Like, no one could have erased it. Why would the Imperials go into their own archives and erase something? And they're like, well, maybe Palpatine wanted to keep him off the record completely so no one knew about him. And the New Republic are like, what? No, that can't be right. And then only when they're fully confronted with something that's completely indisputable, they're like, maybe Thrawn is a threat. And like Leia is like, and Luke and Han are all like, come on, and Wedge as well. And they're like, we've been saying this for ages, and we like the heroes of the rebellion, you just didn't listen to us. And it's the same again in this, which is they're denying it. They're trying not to confront it. They're hiding away. And I think fear is an element. Don't get me wrong, I do believe that's a part. But what I think the biggest issue with the New Republic is arrogance. It's this complacency. And you find it in every element of the New Republic, apart from the main kind of character we like. You know, Mon Mothma will try her best, but Mon Mothma in the books and stuff, historically, she's one of the reasons why the First Order came about. She didn't like directly cause someone to go to the First Order, but she was very firm in going forward with demilitarization of the New Republic, basically getting rid of all the warships, armies, all this stuff, trying to strip it all back and not spend as much money and resources on these things. And like, although on paper that sounds like a lovely idea, you know, I would love for the UK not to spend a penny on war. That would be great. But I know that there's only a fine line between what seemed a time of peace and a time of war. And I know in certain places in the world right now there's still war going on, so it's just more coming from the Western perspective. But it's like, with the New Republic, because they're demilitarized, they're trying to demilitarize, they're trying to save money, and they're trying to do all these things right. And they're like, look, we're not the Empire, okay, guys? That's not us. We're not trying to hold against your rights. We're not trying to be fascists. We're not trying to commit genocide. We just want it to be the way it was before in the Republic days. But the good times before the corrupt politicians and the rise of Palpatine and all that stuff. And I appreciate they're trying, but I think it's just hubris. And I think that they're just so confident. They're just so like, oh yeah, we beat the Empire, even though Xiono had no impact and nothing to do with the Empire losing. And it's these people that just, it's arrogance. And I find it's very, not to delve too deep, but we find that in our current world. Like, there's a lot of people who are very, very, they are very arrogant about their own nation. You've got their own pride, they're patriots. You've got that in the UK, you've got it especially in the US. And they're like, we're the best country ever. And you're like, well, what's your measuring? How are you measuring this? Is it incarceration rates? Is it size of the military? Is it how much money you make worldwide? Like, what element are you trying to define yourself being the best by? And is it really true? Probably not. I wouldn't really say any nation on Earth is the best nation. I'd probably say they will have differing accolades. But with the New Republic, it's like, we beat the bad guys. We're amazing. And one of the things with Xiono, where I'm sorry to destroy your theory, but I know what happens to Xiono. And I'm going to tell everyone here. So there is a show, and it is called Star Wars Resistance. And I believe Dave Filoni produced it, but I don't believe he had as much of a hand in it as he did for Clone Wars and for Rebels. He may have done, but I'm fairly certain he didn't. Now, Clone Wars starts weak and has a couple of shining moments, and then really gets its stride and is fantastic. Inconsistent at points, but is fantastic. Has some of the best moments in Star Wars in it. Rebels starts a bit slow, but it builds up, and by the end of season 2, it's got some of the best moments in Star Wars in, and then season 3 and 4 are absolutely bloody phenomenal. You've got other Filoni projects. Tales of the Jedi is really good. Bad Batch again, all fantastic projects. Star Wars Resistance, it was meant to be for, as Clone Wars was to the prequels, Resistance would be to the sequels. It is not. It's 2 seasons. The first season is genuinely some of the weakest Star Wars I've ever seen in my life. And I'm currently watching the Young Jedi Adventures, which I think you've started watching with George.
Yes, I've seen them, yeah.
Yeah, and I actually quite like them. I don't watch them a lot. I haven't finished them because it's just 10 minutes here and there for me and Megan having dinner or something, or we have to go out for something. It's like, well, we've got spare 10 minutes. Let's just chuck on one of these episodes designed for 6-year-olds. But those are of more enjoyable quality than a Star Wars Resistance, and they are aimed at a younger audience. And Resistance is just this quite weak show. I know there's a few people that really enjoy it. I'm not trying to shit on the people who made it, but it's like, the plots are quite boring. The characters are borderline insufferable. The start and the end of Series 1 are actually really good, mainly because Poe Dameron's in it, voiced by Oscar Isaac. And then Series 2 really steps up, really does. It's still not great. Season 2 of Resistance, I'd say, for almost every episode, is still weaker than almost all of Clone Wars Series 1, but it does improve. Series 2, you could actually watch and go, this is all right. Series 1, I had to force myself to watch. I actually started Star Wars Resistance 3 times, which for a Star Wars project, people would know I gobble that shit up. Resistance, I started, and I just couldn't bring myself to keep watching it. I just forced myself so that I'd seen it. And I'm glad I did, because Senator Xiono, he lives to the sequel trilogy, at least to The Force Awakens / Last Jedi. I'm fairly certain he survived all the way to The Rise of Skywalker. And so the reason we know this is because his son is called Kazuda. Let me just double check. Kazuda. So Kazuda is the main character in Star Wars Resistance. He really wants to be a pilot. He's a bit of an oaf. I find him insufferable. I think he's just the worst. It's basically every quality you don't like about Han Solo and Luke from A New Hope. You put it together and that's the character. And you're like, how could anyone like this person? And then they bring in a
Megan loved him.
Well, I've not even shown this to Megan. Like there's no point. She will hate it. The Resistance is just that show. Like it's one of the worst rated pieces of Star Wars content that exists. It's not good. But he's insufferable. Kazuda. I'll show you a picture from Wikipedia just so you and other people can know. There you go. It's from my phone, so it's all reflecty, but that's how he looks. He does improve as a character, but there's also like a Nikto in it as well, who's like his mate, and his mate, he's also insufferable in very different ways. So not to rail on Star Wars Resistance, but Kazuda's dad, Xiono, I didn't even look up his actual name. I knew, where is it? Hamato. So Hamato Xiono, he's a semi-big part of one of the arcs in Star Wars Resistance, but he's Kazuda's dad. They're based on Hosnian Prime, which is the system that was blown up by the First Order in The Force Awakens. So the whole plot line is the end of Star Wars Resistance Series 1, the end of it is right where The Force Awakens starts. When the Starkiller base destroys Hosnian Prime and all that stuff, that's where the series ends, which is one of the reasons why those episodes are so good, because it's so deep and got so much weight to it, and where his family are from Hosnian Prime, what repercussions does that have? So we know what happens to him, but that's kind of a general overview of my very common opinion of Star Wars Resistance, and also B, what that connection was. I will note that the other senators that I saw, I didn't personally recognise. Now, I'm looking this up, I didn't do this from memory, but you've got Senator Rodrigo, Senator Marwood, and then you've got Senator... there was another one, but I don't know if they had any speaking lines.
Yeah, there was another one who was...
the grand species,
octopus kind, yeah.
3 eyes and like a goat head. Yeah, the species are called a gran. I don't know why George Lucas called them gran, considering that's the nickname for a grandmother. But yeah, that's me verbally waterboarding you with information about Star Wars Resistance. So any comments on that or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. If that's kind of what is going to happen further down the line, then probably he isn't a bad guy. He probably is just scared. He probably is just a case of, let's put my head in the sand. We don't need to kind of deal with this at this moment. I still think they could have quite easily they wouldn't have said Hera to go investigate, but they could have sent someone. They could have just said, right, send out Wooncraft. Having said that, we see what happens when Wooncraft goes out there. They would never have seen it again. So it's always amusing when you see them dogfights. You can kind of see the two main actors, and then Canon fodder.
Yeah. Are they wearing a mask? Yes. Do they have a first name? No. They're probably going to die. The red shirts.
I mean, they might as well just put a red shirt on them and send them off. If we're going to go into that, what were them crafts? I've seen them crafts before, but I don't know. Are they from the prequels?
The crafts that were being flown by the air quotes baddies, Shin Hati and stuff like that. Now, I am not an expert on the crafts themselves, so I'm now currently full opening to everyone. I'm looking on Wikipedia because Starships are probably my weakest point of Star Wars trivia, I'd say. Character names are probably up there, and species and planets and stuff, but I don't always know. So I'm just looking at what exactly it was, because there was there's a note. Go ahead.
It looked like there was from maybe episode 3. I think there was a bit where we had a big ship battle, and I think they had like they look a bit like Spitfires, to be fair. That's kind of what I thought. As soon as I saw them, I thought, I'm sure I've seen them before, which would maybe make sense if, the Empire was starting to try, build up again. They're going to go back to a bit more open technology because they don't have the resources they had before. So it's like, let's steal some of these old ships. No one will notice them, especially on Corellia. If they could take them off there, these old abandoned spaceships that people won't notice that have gone missing.
Mm-hmm.
And that, but yeah, I just thought, I'll ask Mike. I knew this were a bit of a dodgy subject. I probably actually should have looked at myself, but I thought, you never know. You might be able to go, yeah, I know exactly what these are.
It's a hard one with ships, because sometimes they make new ships, sometimes they are homages to older ships. You've got in the prequels, you've got something called I think it's the Arc 170 or Arc 130, and they're like the predecessors to the X-Wings. But then when you look more into it, why X-Wings were even made is really a weird question, because the Rebellion weren't, to my knowledge in canon, actually making X-Wings. So it's like, well, who was making them then? Who designed them? Because between the prequels and the originals, there were X-Wings, and there's not really a clear answer of where they came from. There's like loose lore in visual dictionaries about, oh yeah, this Corellian shipyard designed them and then made a handful, but then the Empire didn't want them, so they just got scrapped, or they just got put to one side, and the Empire went with the TIE fighters instead because they're cheaper and easier, no deflector shields and blah blah blah. But it's like, but where? How is the Rebellion relying on X-Wings so much? How are they always relying on Y-Wings? Now, Y-Wings are linked a bit more, but there's certain new ships that come up, and I'm like, I don't know if I recognize that, or if it's something completely new, or even if it's like a homage ship. Because on IMDb, there's a bit of trivia, and trivia on IMDb is user inputted, so you have to take it with a pinch of salt. But they said that Shin and Marok's starfighters appear to have a similar cabin and fuselage to General Grievous's fighter, the Soulless One, while also it has the wings of a Republic Z-95 Headhunter. So it is possible that these starfighters are cobbled together from Clone Wars era ships. So that's from someone on IMDb. So I don't know if I assume they're correct in thinking that, because I think that you're probably right in thinking you recognize them. But if this individual is correct, it seems to be two ships kind of smushed together.
Which, again, maybe I've seen it and thought, that's why I recognise part of it. It did remind me an awful lot of, like, as I say, like a Spitfire. I just thought, these are different, but again, they looked familiar to me. It was nice. We got a bit of a starfight, a bit of a ship battle there. Again, the bit where they have to work in tandem with each other. Instead of just Ahsoka kind of going, no, we're doing this, we're doing, you've just got to do it. You've just got to do it, Sabine. And then realizing that she doesn't work that way. And then, because Ahsoka never finished her training, although she has now taken on a Padawan, she technically, I suppose, isn't a Jedi Master. She's never finished that training. So she's, again, we've seen this before with Canon and Ezra. She's got to kind of work out the path that they're both going to take together, which, again, it goes back to, when Hunrai said to her, you're not a typical Jedi, neither your master, and neither is she. So they've got to find a different way. It's not like a rule book of this is how you train a Jedi. Follow these steps and you'll become one in 6 months' time. It's not that kind of thing. And once they started working together and going, right, because Sabine's a lot better star pilot than what Ahsoka is, I would say. And
in this show, I'd say live action, we've not seen Ahsoka really pull off any crazy moves.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe in Clone Wars she does fly ships and she's fantastic, but No, but
I mean, the thing is, she's
I've
the
seen Sabine
Padawan.
do.
Well, she's the Padawan to Anakin, and Anakin is known as arguably the best starfighter ever, or at least among them.
Right.
Anakin was, and that's why Vader is so prolific, and then Luke genetically somehow became a great starfighter. But it's a weird one with Ahsoka because when I was watching this, I was thinking, I was like, I can't remember if Ahsoka was ever. I know she wasn't as good as Anakin. I think she was more confident than Obi-Wan because Obi-Wan doesn't like flying very much. But like, I don't think she's ever been known to be a prolific starfighter. I think she's just a talented pilot, as most Jedi are. So I think Sabine, you may be right. She might actually be a better pilot than Ahsoka.
Yeah, I mean, personally, at that point, I think what would have worked better for them was for Ahsoka to say, take the ship, I'm off to the guns, and done it that way. Because, like Sabine says, she sits in and says, "You've changed my controls, or you've changed some settings."
Yeah, turned off.
And
my
then
presets.
It's like, shit, I can't deal with that right now. I've just kind of improvise. But again, we see the fact that these two now are they're finding that kind of relationship to be able to trust each other to do a certain way. It's very quick, but there again, I suppose they've done this before, so maybe they're slipping back into before she left her. So maybe they're kind of coming back to it. Hopefully, I don't know. Again, that's not covered in Clone Wars, so this is an area that no one really seems to know, unless there's a comic out there.
The only Rebels comics is here for video watchers, and they're all set within the confines of the Rebels series. So we've got no specific, to my knowledge, we have no knowledge of anything to do with Sabine outside of Star Wars Rebels, Force of Destiny, she appears in a couple of those, but they're very minor, and then Ahsoka. To my knowledge, Sabine doesn't appear anywhere else.
Which, I mean, it's kind of good because we're all on the same footing now. Mm-hmm. You know, they can do, to a certain degree, pretty much what they want. Obviously, you know, there's a certain things they can't do because they've still got episode, 7, 8, 9? Mm-hmm. So they've got to kind of tie into it. But there's a lot of breathing space now of what they can do. And that, but yeah, as I said, it was nice. We got that kind of Starship battle. And then we get the bit where she just comes to the front and it's like, I'm going out there. And I thought, whoa, here we go. How's this going to work? Can a lightsaber blade deflect, Starship, laser shots? But obviously she can. Again, another bit of, you could see the red shirt coming towards them thinking, this is where you go. and that... we see, is it Marrok?
Yeah.
It is Marrok, isn't it? Obviously, they've got his voice, it's a bit distorted. Inquisitors don't have force powers or anything, do they?
No, Inquisitors do. Inquisitors, yeah, a lot of Inquisitors are fallen Jedi. So a lot of the time they're tortured or asked nicely, but usually tortured into becoming...
So is Starkiller an Inquisitor, not a Sith?
As in Starkiller from Legends?
Yes, yeah.
In Legends, there weren't really Inquisitors. They're technically in the radio play of A New Hope, there's Inquisitors are mentioned a little bit, but that's like deep cut, barely canon Legends in Legends continuity. Starkiller was never an Inquisitor. There is, first of all, his storyline takes place like quite a few years before A New Hope. I think it's closer to A New Hope than Revenge of the Sith, off the top of my head. But he was never an Inquisitor. There's a bit... There's Sith Stalker armor, which when you complete the Force Unleashed, if you do the dark side ending, and then you get all like mutilated and stuff, you become the new Vader, and that's the Sith Stalker armor, and that's where he has like a mask on and looks all dark and twisted and very cool, I might add. He was never an Inquisitor, but there were at least rumors that when they made the Clone Wars, they were gonna put Galen Marek, aka Starkiller, as an Inquisitor. I think they even started on the 3D design of his character model. I seem to recall.
Right.
But they decided against it. But Sam Witwer's obviously always been involved in the animated side of things from doing so many voices.
Yeah, because I know I did send you the video, which you didn't get to watch, but he was on Twitch and someone asked him about Ahsoka, and his response were kind of, oh yeah, I did work on Ahsoka, but nothing major. But I love you, Dave, and that was kind of his thing. Now he could have rehearsed this and kind of thought, yeah, I did work on Ahsoka. Could have seen me soon. But then looking at IMDb, there is actually now a person, Paul Danell, who is now put as Marrok. Now, maybe we were saying it before we started recording, he could be the stunt guy there. I don't know. We know Sam's going to be in there somewhere, some voice at least, but whether he's going to turn up. I did read somewhere, I didn't get to read it properly, that they have said that the post-release stuff they are taking it as canon. So maybe it will kind of turn up somewhere along the lines, but maybe they're going to save that for something else. Maybe that could be a separate series. I know a lot of people would love that, but then you could just go play the game, I suppose. I
mean, I love it. I've got obviously one of my tattoos is of Starkiller, but like my view on Starkiller is I think his story is near perfect. I like both Force Unleashed 1 and 2, even though 2 is much more flawed than the first one. I absolutely love it. Force Unleashed 1 is one of my favourite games ever, and I think the plot is phenomenal. But I think the time has kind of passed, because what they did is a lot of the elements from Star Wars Rebels is taken from the Force Unleashed. So you've got a washed-up Jedi who barely wants to be a Jedi anymore, General Kota. He gets blinded by the fault of his essentially apprentice, which obviously happens to Canon as well. You've got someone who kind of starts off dark, but then turns to the light, but still utilizes both abilities and has a natural affluency in the Force. Where Ezra never really started in the dark, but he was never aligned. He was kind of morally grey, and then he became good, dabbled in the dark, and went back. He dabbled. He had a struggle, a lot of the relationship between Starkiller and General Kota mirrors that of Kanan and Ezra in a lot of areas. Yeah. And Filoni loves Legends content, and I think he loves The Force Unleashed as well. And obviously him getting Sam Witwer to voice so many characters for Clone Wars and Rebels, I think shows that. So I feel like if we got Sam Witwer in live action as a central character, I think I personally would want him to be Starkiller, but in a completely different era of Star Wars. Like, I'd love Starkiller to be in, like, old Republic stuff, like thousands of years ago when there were loads of Jedi and Sith. I would really like to see a story with him, but what if Starkiller was about during this time where there were loads of Jedi and loads of Sith, and he could literally just pick a side? I think that would make for a more compelling character story and wouldn't break the canon. Because I think that with the amount of content now that is around canon and their focus on trying to make sure that canon is, for the most part, all intertwining and not contradicting itself, I think if you then put in the Force Unleashed story, which is set, as I said, only a few years before A New Hope, where Vader's had a secret apprentice this whole time, it's never been mentioned, ever. It's not even rumoured or anything. And then he just kind of pops up about 10 years later, 5 years after Return of the Jedi, but 10 years after Rebels and things, and he just pops up and he's like, "Hey guys, I'm bad now, but I've never appeared again." I'm sure they could write 2 lines of dialogue that would probably solve that, or a flashback that he was trapped somewhere for ages or something. But I feel like they could only weaken his character by adapting it to live action in the story it's set, because his whole, his family crest was the crest of the rebellion. He saved Leia and Bail Organa and all these rebellion leaders, and he was kind of the reason the rebellion started, was because Vader tasked him with going off and starting a rebellion to fight against Palpatine, to distract Palpatine, so that, all these convoluted things. And it's like, none of that, you couldn't do any of that. So him just appearing now, I think, would take away quite a lot from his character. And I think that's why they didn't include him in the Clone Wars, because they thought about him just being an Inquisitor. And it's like, don't get me wrong, if I see Sam Witwer in live action, if he's Galen Marek, A, I'll be the coolest person ever because I've got a tattoo. But B, it will be like, I'm so excited and happy, and all these criticisms I'm listing will somewhat dissipate. But if I got to choose, I love the character. I just want him in a different era, to be honest. Which technically Ahsoka is a different era to where he was, but I don't know how he could be Darth Vader's secret apprentice without it appearing elsewhere. That's kind of where my issue lies.
It would be a fantastic thing to have. I can see your point, but at the same point, I think a good season finale, maybe not this season, or maybe further down the line, have Ahsoka versus Starkiller. I mean, Anakin's apprentice versus Vader's apprentice. I mean,
maybe he was secretly working with like Thrawn or something. That could be a good thing. He got sent off by Thrawn to do some sort of mission. It went wrong. He disappeared. No one heard from him, and then he's come back now since Thrawn disappeared. He turned Baylan Skoll and Shin Hattai and trained up Marek. Like, that would be like a Dark Jedi. That would actually be quite a cool idea, I suppose. Already you've changed my mind.
I mean, it's again, you know, we're fans. We're going to come out with lots of great ideas that we think are great ideas anyway. It just may not work. It may not fit into the canon, and it may not fit the story that, you know, he wants to tell. I'm sure he's planned out, you know, probably season 2, maybe even season 3, if they ever get that far. And that, but again, if you are listening, Dave, you know, it's not a bad idea. But yeah, I mean, going back to, we saw the ships fighting, and you could kind of, like we said, the red shirt guys are going to get taken out. I did like the fact that when Shin gets told to kind of be called off by Morgan, she did, but she still said, "Look, stay on my, you know, on my 6" kind of thing. She didn't believe Morgan were going to be able to take Ahsoka out. And then obviously the big, I don't remember what they called it, the big gateway.
The Eye of Sion.
Right. Is that a bit of a callback to the eye from Andor? Is that anything to do? You know, there was the episode with the eye where we saw the like the Northern Lights kind of thing.
Oh, that's a good point. I don't know. I think the Eye of Sion, I'm fairly certain the Eye of Sion is actually from modern mythology. I think because in Matrix, have you seen all the Matrix movies? Well, oh, you have, because you spoke about the fourth one. I've not seen all the Matrix movies. I've only seen the trilogy. But you know, they go down to Zion, the kind of...
Yes.
So I think Zion is it's
term... kind of the underbase where the... Yeah,
I'm fairly certain. I'm just going to double check this. I'm fairly certain from what I've seen in popular culture that Sion is an imaginary place considered to be perfect or ideal. It's a utopia. It's a place said to exist in fictional or religious writings and things. And so I think it comes from Latin. So it's basically, and you've got Zions in the Bible. There's a hill in Jerusalem that a temple was built. It was used to symbolize the city itself. So it's like a religious center. So the Eye of Zion is basically like, here's a way for us to go to utopia, wherever this is. And that's potentially where Thrawn is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which, just going to the Game of Thrones kind of star map, I know that you linked someone had kind of said, this is Coruscant, this is all these different planets, and someone had translated it all. I'm guessing from how it all kind of goes together, they all join at one point, one planet, and I'm thinking that's probably where Thrawn is. I think, because it seems to kind of drift off through space for quite some time, and then the final place where they all kind of come together is one planet, and I don't remember if that was in the description that you posted for us, but I'm thinking that's maybe where they're aiming, where Thrawn's going to be, this upper galaxy, that, because they mention there is, you know, this eye is able to kind of do bigger distances and bigger speeds to kind of go to other galaxies, what the Purrgil can do, which again, brilliant. We saw the Purrgil. It would just they were amazing to kind of see them. I did feel as they kind of went into the mist, I thought this feels a lot like one of the episodes in Rebels where they're kind of going down and they were draining the gases, weren't they, to be able to recharge themselves. It was like a pit stop from, and then the Empire was. See, I did watch it. It was fantastic. Again, it was lovely to see that. I loved to see the Purrgil. I thought we would see him somewhere. I didn't expect it to be quite so quick. There was a look there as well. Maybe I'm reading into it, but there was a look of Sabine as they kind of they fly past and you see one of the Purrgil's eyes, and then there's a shot of Sabine, and like she's looking. Now, they do mention, that's the first time she's seen the Purrgil since, obviously, when Ezra took Thrawn away. But I just wonder whether is that a nod to Ezra connected to the Purrgil? Is Sabine going to connect to the Purrgil so that they may not be able to use the eye, but maybe they'll use the Purrgil to get to where Thrawn is.
Yeah, again, I mean that's what I think. That's my suspicion. I think I said in the prior episode, one of my loose predictions was the Eye of Zion is basically a giant hyperspace ring. I imagine they're going to connect a Star Destroyer or Star Dreadnought or something up to it, and then go across from where they are to this other galaxy that the Chiss are from. And I suspect that the Purrgil are going to be the only way that some of the heroes get there. We might be wrong. All the heroes might just stow aboard the ship and then they go along with it. But maybe the Purrgil are the only way that the heroes make it back. Like, I'm fairly certain that the Purrgil are not only here to remind people that's how Ezra disappeared and Thrawn disappeared in the first place. I think that they used too much too quickly already. And the fact that Grogu saw them as a little thing in Mandalorian Series 3 in hyperspace, I feel like they're going to play quite a pivotal role in how, in the whole Mandoverse, how the Filoni movie's going to be, how all these series are going to interconnect. I think they're going to be a major part. And I believe that they will probably be the way that the heroes get to or from this place, which I assume, so in Star Wars, the galaxy, so the known galaxy, you got the core worlds and the inner rim, then you got the mid rim and the outer rim and the unknown regions. And the inner planets and sort of inner rim, you've got Corellia and you've got the main one, which is Coruscant. Then you've got the mid rim, we've got certain more outer planets, but still quite known, Naboo, things like that. Then you've got the outer rim, and then which is where Tatooine and Jakku and things like that are generally less habitable planets, but not always. And then further from that, it's kind of spheres. You've got the inner ring, so it's like a target almost. And then you go outside a certain border, loosely, and you become the unknown regions. And there are places in the unknown regions, like Exegol, I think was in the unknown regions, the Sith planet from Rise of Skywalker. There's a few places that have been in the unknown regions. It's just a place that hasn't been charted yet. But then when you go through a certain degree of unknown regions, there's a crust almost of unknown regions, and then you go beyond that and you go to wild space. And wild space is not only unknown, but it's it's so unknown we literally have no idea. And a lot of the time in wild space, there's asteroid storms and suns and black holes and giant nebula preventing things, like we saw in Rebels when they find the Lasat homeworld, and it's through that crazy nebula, and they find the safe haven for Zeb and his people. And it's when that's, I'm fairly certain, in wild space, there's that kind of stuff. You just don't know what's out there. And I think what I recall from the Canon Thrawn books, I've not read the Ascendancy trilogy, but I've read the Thrawn trilogy, and it mentions the Chiss, which is the species he is, blue-skinned, red-eyed individuals. And they've got that whole, a whole system going on in their own galaxies and stuff. And in where they're from, we don't really know. I know in Thrawn obviously gets there and back. That's how Thrawn's kind of in our galaxy, in air quotes, the Skywalker galaxy. But there is a way to go between them. I just think it's a very, very long time. And I think that's where it's going to leading to.
I mean, the eye itself, is that going to be just a one-way thing? Will they have to rebuild something at the other end, or will it be able to draw things back?
I think it depends how much power it needs, because it's got 6 or something hyperdrive.
6 hyperdrives. So they've installed the 6th one, they said, which is quite convenient. They find it on the 6th one.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that it's all right having a daughter go through there, but you need to be able to come back.
Yeah.
So unless they stock up and they're able to build another one of these at the other end, you're basically doing a one-way trip. But, I mean, we don't know how this works. Maybe it's one of these things where they turn it on, the door opens, and they've got so long where they can travel back and forth. But then they're relying an awful lot of one finding Thrawn, and then two being able to get him back and get him through the door in time. I'm sure it's all planned out. We know, it's going to work. But I kind of agree with what you've said. I think they're going to still aboard the ship somehow, get on the ship, get out there, and then it's a case of trying to get back. There's no way back. And the Purrgil are the ones that bring them back to where they need to be. But I mean, Hunyai did scan it all, and he does say at one point, "Oh, that's really interesting," and something he'd not expected. But then she shut him off again, and that. So I'm sure episode 4 is going to probably explore that a lot more and kind of set out how they're gonna go about this. But so far, it's just it's ticking all the boxes. Like Andor did. Andor each week got better and better and better. I can't really think of a bad episode from there. And it although it wasn't lightsabers, it felt Star Wars. This again, we've got lightsabers, and it really does feel like Star Wars. Mando is fantastic. I really enjoy it, but it's a different type of feel. Especially season 1 was very much kind of quest of the week. I felt that was more of a struggle than season 2 was a lot better. And that going forward, but this just feel it. I'm getting them Star Wars feelings from watching the, original 3 and that, and going for it, and even the prequels. Yes, going back and watching them again, and that I think Dave said that Phantom Menace probably, and Attack of the Clones probably clouded his judgment of Revenge of the Sith, and that which it is. I mean, we get the fantastic, Anakin and Kenobi there. But yeah, I love the fact that I'm getting these feelings again of watching Star Wars, and again, I can't wait until next week now to watch the next episode. You'd mentioned I wish they'd done, kind of first 4 episodes, and then do the next 4 episodes, and that as kind of a group, because I just want more. But then again, we'll complain then that there's too much content all at once.
I think my ideal for this would be 2 episodes ago. I think it should be 2 episodes to, that for me personally, although I like the weekly discussion shows, my only issue with this episode is that although stuff did happen, it felt like an in-between episode. And I think that when you watch Star Wars Rebels, or any of the other Star Wars content, that's in a series, when you have a weaker episode, you normally watch, especially when they're 20 minutes long, you generally watch them in batches. So when you watch Rebels or Clone Wars or things like that, or even Mandalorian to a degree, if you're going to do a rewatch or you're watching it for the first time, it's all out, usually you don't watch one episode a go. Normally you watch a few. So often if you get a weaker episode, it kind of connects in with the stronger episodes on either side. And I personally preferred this episode to the prior 2, mainly because, as you said right at the start of this, because we're Rebels fans, we already knew basically everything, and because all the events of the first 2 episodes were set before the Rebels epilogue, it was somewhat introducing the characters to an audience who only know live action stuff, which is the vast majority of people who watch Star Wars. Vast majority of people have never seen the animated stuff, and it's like this episode felt like, as you said, it kind of went on by itself, but this almost felt like a second episode, not a third. This felt like the last episode or episodes were setting the scene, then we were starting on the journey, and the next episode something big's going to happen. Because where this is 8 episodes as well, next episode is kind of the mid-series. So episode 4 and 5 is going to be halfway through the series. So there's probably going to be something major that happens there. I suspect Marrok is just going to get killed. I feel like he's just a throwaway character. But there's a couple of things, because I know I've hit the hour mark, but there's a couple more things I want to talk about. So one element is the line which is few Mandalorians ever became Jedi. And so people online have been talking about this a little bit. As I said, I usually try to avoid listening to people online talk about stuff before I record these things because it can skew my views. But in Rebels and in Clone Wars first, it was established that there was a Mandalorian Jedi, the Great Mandalore, and it was Tar Vizsla, I believe his name was. It was definitely part of the Vizsla clan, but he was the first Mandalorian Jedi. He made the Darksaber, and that was, I think, at the tail end of the Mandalorian Wars, and that kind of ended the wars between the Mandalorians and the Jedi, I think, to a degree. And then, obviously, in this, it says few Mandalorians have ever become Jedi, which is interesting, because it means that it's not just, Mandalore the Great or Tar Vizsla. It's not just him, and then potentially Grogu, and potentially Sabine, and then no one else. Like it's more. I like that, and I'm intrigued by that.
There must be something else in between.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to see if there's more. I assume there's not more Darksabers, because the Darksaber wouldn't be held in such high regard if other Mandalorians had made Darksabers. So I would love a series or one-off episode to go back and focus in on Tar Vizsla.
Yeah, maybe that's something that, because we're going to get Acolytes, aren't we? Is it next year, hopefully?
Get what, sorry?
I think it. Is it Acolytes?
Acolyte, yes, sorry. Acolyte is going to be set in the High Republic era. So there could be, but I've consumed, as I'm obsessed, every single piece of High Republic content. People maybe to see them, all the books here, and all the comics and audio dramas and even the short stories. They've not mentioned any Mandalorian Jedi in the High Republic. In fact, Mandalorians have barely been mentioned at all in the High Republic. So it could be the Acolyte might be the vessel for that. But from my understanding, the Acolyte is also only 100-ish years before the Phantom Menace. So it's not ridiculous. It's not like ridiculously far back. It's only, a century is a long time. In Star Wars terms, it's not.
Yeah. Something you did mention, I was thinking back when we did Andor. Andor kind of split into 3 episodes, kind of arcs. What were 3 or 4 episodes, kind of arcs? Maybe this is kind of started. Maybe this is what they should have done. 3, and then last 2. Because it was kind of the first 2 were set up. This one were kind of this is the task of what we're going to do, and we've discovered what the bad guys are doing now, and then the next episode will be kind of how they're then going to plan to kind of get and try to stop them or bring Ezra back. I mean, I suppose the big arc really, although it's Ahsoka, they are kind of, the keep alluding to, is to get Ezra back. That's kind of what their core thing that's driving them. Yes, there's Thrawn, but to be fair, it's, even Senator's mentioned, you're mentioning Thrawn, but it's just a kind of a smoke screen because you want to go get Ezra back. That's their driving force at the moment. Thrawn is, although he's dangerous and he should be the main concern, he is kind of a backseat in a way to him because that's not what they want. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I do feel that maybe it's going to be the case of these first 3 kind of the first arc, then we're going to get a middle arc of 2 or 3 episodes, and then I think the final 2 will be a bit like what we've had in Rebels, where the last 2 episodes normally have been like a 2-parter.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'd say regarding the quest of the protagonists, I think that Hera and Sabine are definitely more for getting Ezra, but I think that Ahsoka is more for getting Thrawn. I think she doesn't really. I mean, she had a bit of a connection with Ezra, but if you think about the episodes of Rebels, she probably had 5?
Yeah, but she owes Ezra her life, really.
To a degree,
without
but
Ezra, she probably wouldn't have.
Oh, she wouldn't be, but also she had her concerns that Ezra essentially pulled her out of time to save her. I think the only thing that gave her some solace is that Morai, the convor, was there. Obviously, the personification of a certain Force deity, which you'll get to experience in the Clone Wars. So I definitely think that, you know, Ahsoka wants to save Ezra, but I think that Ahsoka is more aligned with, like, the Jedi tenets that Obi-Wan shows a bit more, in especially Attack of the Clones, where it's like, we can't just save this one person. We have to try and think of the whole. And I think, you know, stopping Thrawn is better than saving Ezra. Probably.
I mean, she says that in The World Between Worlds.
Yeah.
You could save one, but I've just written it down and then you mentioned it. Well, I haven't seen him anywhere.
I've thought
and
that
you've
as
said
well.
That he's normally. You've said in previous things, whenever Ahsoka's been there, he's been in the background. And I'm desperately looking even for like a picture or a marking, and I haven't seen him anywhere. So I'm just wondering whether he was in The World Between Worlds and that, but
we've seen him in live
action. Have we seen him since then?
Yeah.
Yes, he was in Mandalorian. Wasn't
yeah, we saw him before. I say him. I think Morai might be female. It's a bird. It doesn't really. It's not really making a world of difference. But Morai, we saw in Mandalorian before we saw Ahsoka. Which that's
it was
the weirdest
on one
part.
of the trees.
If Morai wasn't there in Mandalorian, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I don't know what's happened to Morai. Maybe it'll pop up in an important event, or maybe that's the only time that Morai does pop up, because the World Between Worlds, obviously Ahsoka meeting Din Djarin and Grogu, that was quite a pivotal moment, not only for Din Djarin and Grogu, but also Ahsoka was there to try and capture Morgan Elsbeth, to then try and figure out what's going on from there, really. And so it is interesting, but it does also raise questions of, like, if Sabine wanted to be a Jedi, why is she going with Ahsoka? Why is she not going with Luke and what he's doing? Maybe Luke's not ready. I don't know. He's building his new Jedi temple, obviously. So there are some questions around what's Luke up to. And I don't really want Luke to pop up, but I do want them to somewhat address, because if, like, the whole Rebels squad go against Thrawn, everyone's going to be like, why are you not calling the only other Jedi in the known galaxy right now? Why is he not helping? And if there should be a line to kind of explain that. But I was thinking, after my episode with Dave, I was like, oh, Morai hasn't popped up. They'll pop up eventually. And then it's another episode without Morai.
It may be one of those things. It may be one of those things where Morai appears in major areas. Like you said, when she meets Din and then she catches Morgan, World Between Worlds, quite a major thing. So maybe it's one of those things. If we do see the bird appear, it's like, oh, something's really going to kick off here. It might be that kind of nod of, oh shit, things are getting serious now.
Oh yeah, was also just thinking. I was going to say, with Tar Vizsla that I mentioned, just because I looked it up, and I want to look something else up because I got it up on my phone. Tar Vizsla, the first Mandalorian Jedi who made the Darksaber, it was around 1,050 years before the Battle of Yavin. So it was about 1,020 years before the Phantom Menace-ish. At the moment, they may change that by, a century or so, but loosely what we understand now is about 1,000 years before. So actually, that gives more weight to your theory that if there could be a Mandalorian Jedi in the Acolyte, because I thought Tar Vizsla had been about like millennia before that. The Jedi Order and Hu Yang himself are around 25,000 years old at the time of A New Hope. And so you just think, you go back that far. My main question is, how on earth has droid technology not really improved over 25,000 years? But that's a question for a whole nother.
Maybe it's got to the level that it can't
get any better.
Maybe protocol. It's protocol. We can't go any further now. This is the protocol. You've got to follow this.
But it's interesting because if it's only been 1,000 years and there's been at least a few Mandalorian Jedi, there's got to be at least another 2 between then. And the Yoda's been around for like 900 years, and the Jedi and Sith Wars ended around 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, thereabouts. So it's like the Mandalorian Jedi was around the time that the Sith Wars was ending, and that means that in the essentially 1,000 years of peace, that there was a few Mandalorian Jedi in that time. So there definitely, in the Acolyte, there certainly could be one. And it would tie in with the Mandalorian series. So
the thing is, you kind of being a Jedi is like your religion. You know, being a Mandalorian is like their religion.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're not really going to get many because then you're crossing religions there. So they're kind of going to, you know, maybe someone does feel a bit force sensitive, but that's going against wearing the Mandalorian armor, kind of doing that, you know, this is the way kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that maybe there could have been potential of a lot more Jedi that could come from there, or even Sith, but it's not, because, you know, that there may be a call in there for them, but it's like, well, this isn't the way we should be. This is not the way,
yeah,
so to speak, and that, you know, I'm getting feelings. Well, this is not the way, son. You don't go that way, you know. But that's the thing. It could have been one of those where there could have been potential, several of them there, but because it's against what they believe in, you know, we don't see it that way. And Sabine's a bit of an odd one because she is Mandalorian, but at the same point, she's stepped away from there as well. So she is that grey area between everything, and it could be one of those that ties it all together. I think you mentioned, you know, with Grogu, that may be something that will go further down the line where they kind of interact something there. Grogu's an interesting one. I kind of hope we don't see him in this.
I agree.
I think Megan had mentioned it. I think it wouldn't fit, and that. And I think, though, if Grogu does ever become a Jedi, and that we know he's got the Force, but I think again he could be one of these where he's Force sensitive, but he's not a Jedi because we've seen Yoda being a badass, but Yoda's hundreds years old?
Yeah, at
old?
the time of his death, he was 900 odd years old.
Yeah. You know, Grogu's only a baby, so it's going to be a long time before he's going to get to that point. You know, everyone else is going to be dead by then. So I don't see that, and I don't think it would fit to come into Ahsoka. I don't think it's right for him to do that. So maybe the stories will intertwine at some point, but I feel more, again, she won't be a Jedi, but she may be, maybe she will be a Jedi, but not a Force-sensitive Jedi, is Sabine.
Yeah, well, if she's a Mandalorian mixed with a Jedi, but not that Force-sensitive, maybe she's a Jando or a Medai, who knows. That was me saying it in jest. I was going to say also, I looked up Morai is female. Right. Not that anyone's that fussed about the gender of a fictional bird that has no speaking lines, but just so this channel is trying to be canon correct. I also want to say there's a couple of other Force sensitive groups that are in canon that have been coming to the forefront a lot more. The first one, I think most people remember, is the Guardians of the Wills. So in Rogue One, Donnie Yen as Chirrut Imwe, and then you've got Baz Malbus, who's the actor's name I forget, so apologies. But you've got those two who are Guardians of the Wills, and they're, you know, Donnie Yen's character, Chirrut Imwe, is Force sensitive. You can tell, you know, he senses the Force, he can feel it. He can't necessarily use and manipulate the Force in the same way a Jedi can, but he certainly feels it. And in the High Republic, on Jeddah specifically, there's loads of Force religions. There's the Sorcerers of Tund, which are quite a major one. There's, I'm not going to list them here because I've done it so many times, but like there's lots of different Force sensitive individuals who have, I mean, the Night Sisters of Dathomir are another one, but like it's kind of like what one perceives as what one perceives the Force as, and how much one can manipulate the Force if they even want to, and that's kind of like what it's leaning on. So I'm really liking that element of things. You know, I'm fine with Sabine kind of being like, I don't want to be a Jedi, I don't want to be a Mandalorian, I just kind of want to be me, and that's gonna combine elements of my Mandalorian, you know, the history of my family and the armor and the fighting styles. I like that. And I like the Mandalorian ideals, but I also like the morality of the Jedi, and I do feel the Force. So I quite like there being like a culmination, in a sense, of that. I do enjoy that. But is there anything else on these episodes that you wanted to tackle?
I think we kind of got most of my notes there. They get shot down and get left kind of dead in space, don't they, with the
well, what do you think of
the eye?
So I didn't ask what you thought of Hu Yang as a character, because you've never seen him before, have you?
No, I know he's in Clone Wars. Yeah, so I will meet it. Who does David Tennant voice him in Clone Wars?
Yeah,
right.
It's only one arc though. You'd think he'd be a major character. He's in 3 episodes, I think. It's one story arc.
Oh, right.
Which it's probably one of the best story arcs, I will say. It's called the Youngling arc, and it's all like a group of younglings getting their lightsabers for the first time. And Ahsoka's there, and so's Yoda. But like, it's a really interesting arc showing how the Jedi get their lightsabers, how they make them, all these stuff. So I love it because it's all about somewhat the more mystical side of the Force. But it does raise a lot of questions as like, what the hell has Hu Yang been doing for the last 25 years? Surely Palpatine's one of his main priorities would be, let's take out this droid that's 25,000 years old that has all this history and knowledge of the Jedi. You know, surely that would be priority number 1, or just hook him up to some big machine and get all the Jedi secrets, which again, Palpatine could have done. We don't really know. We just know that we saw Hu Yang during the Clone Wars, and then we've seen him 20 or 30 odd years later, and he's seemingly okay.
He was probably throwing in paperwork and that. It's this kind of thing. But I do. I mean, I do like him. It's the second Doctor Who that I'm aware of is in Star Wars. I did like that. Bendu. Yeah, Tom Baker with the Bendu. Now maybe there's other people who've been in Doctor Who that have been in Star Wars. I don't know, but
there's actors, but actual doctors.
Yeah.
Like, to my knowledge, Christopher Eccleston hasn't been in Star Wars, nor has Peter Capaldi, nor has Matt Smith. There were rumours that Matt Smith was going to play a young Palpatine.
Right.
Which, when Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker used the Force dyad from Rey and Kylo or Ben Solo and got all the power back and became ultra powerful and shot the super massive lightning bolt in the sky, there was originally in the script what they were thinking about doing is making him be really young and turning him back to when he was like 20, and they were going to have Matt Smith play him, but they didn't. And so I wonder, and if this is a rumor, I want to clarify to everyone listening, but if this actually happens, I'm sorry for potentially spoiling stuff, but my theory is that because the Acolyte is 100 years before the Skywalker saga, that my theory is the Acolyte is going to take place over decades, and it's set at the tail end of the High Republic, and what we're going to see is the master of Palpatine, who is Plagueis, or his master, who is Tenebrous in Legends, because Plagueis is canon, but Tenebrous I don't think is canon, but like, we're going to see Darth Tenebrous in the background doing stuff, and then maybe see him teach Plagueis. And then maybe there'll be one little thing right at the end of the Acolyte, which will be like Plagueis taking on a new apprentice, and it will be young Palpatine, and it'll be played by Matt Smith. Who knows? But it depends how long they take, because Matt Smith is, Rise of Skywalker came out 4 years ago, so they were filming that 5 years ago. So, unless it's in the Acolyte now, it's like Matt Smith is aging because he's human. So it's like, how long can you have Matt Smith being a young Palpatine? Even though I don't think he looks anything like Ian McDiarmid. So that's an issue.
He's too tall as well.
Yeah, and his face doesn't match it.
He's too tall. He's not the right. Yeah. Which is a shame. I think he's a good actor, but I don't. I don't see it fitting.
No, I agree.
I'm sure there's other people that could easily,
But that was only a rumor.
Someone like one of the Scouts guys could probably do the, be a young Palpatine. I think that would fit more. The younger, and they've got more of the frame. They're a bit smaller. I think
Taron Egerton, the gentleman who's the main in Kingsman.
Yeah.
That's a no. That you said yes, but what you're actually saying is no because of your tone and your facial expression.
Yeah, because I think I think this is no offense to the if they have sense about having Matt Smith, but I think Taron Egerton is too good looking in a way. I think you need someone who's not ugly, but just normal, just kind of fits in the background, because that's Palpatine. To be fair, although he was, he was someone who was just in the background doing things where people didn't notice. If he was, he is super confident, but if he played being super confident and being so charming and so good looking, people would notice him more. But he doesn't really want that. So if you get someone who's too charismatic, it's going to kind of go against what he is. He wants to kind of go below the radar until he needs to, and then turn on the charm. So I don't think anyone too good, too easy on the eye kind of thing would kind of suit. I don't think. I think it needs to have someone who's a bit more of a kind of a Joe Smo. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's they've probably got all this in the back all ready to go as well.
They're years ahead. The amount of time it takes to add all the CG in and all that jazz is they are way ahead. I mean, when I say way ahead, they've finished. I think they've finished filming Andor now, but obviously you've got to think like they have to get an idea approved, then they have to write it, then they have to flush it out more, then they have to cast it, then they have to get all the set designs made and the CGI pre-done. Then they have to do the first batch of filming and do all that stuff and then reshoots. Then they've got to do post-production as well. So it's like, I think it's approximately a 5-year turnaround from the kind of an initial idea starting. Well, I say initial idea. I mean, the Mandalorian, I assume the Ahsoka series has been an idea for a while since the Mandoverse kind of started, because, Ahsoka popped up in season 2 of Mando, and that was a few years ago now. So,
yeah.
Who knows? Was there anything else do you want to mention about Ahsoka before we go on another tangent about young Palpatine, even though not only is that not even confirmed in the Acolyte, that's not been confirmed anywhere, it's just a rumour.
No, I mean, I do like the, this Ahsoka that we're getting. She's different to the Rebels, which she'll be completely different to the Clone Wars that I'm going to see. That she seems a bit more hardened and chiseled and a bit more kind of
gruff almost.
Kind of, but at the same point, she's trying to be patient. She's trying, but I do like to see this side of her. She's not this, seeing clips of her from Clone Wars, she looks quite a young kind of, eyes are widened, don't know what to expect.
She's a lot more like Ezra was. When you see Ezra in Rebels, and he's quite a bit older than Ahsoka starts out as well. Like Ahsoka in Rebels is very different from Ahsoka in Clone Wars, but you can see Clone Wars is her coming of age. It's her over the course of 3 years going from like a young teenager to like a battle-hardened teenager. So you will see that change, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, when she went to go outside the ship, she's like, I'm going outside. It's like, what?
That was an Anakin Skywalker move, that is. Like that's the kind of thing. I mean, I think he does at some point get on a spacesuit and go outside. But I suppose my perception of Anakin and your perception of Anakin are quite different, because yours is he was a bit of a whiny bitch, and he slaughtered loads of people, and then he was creepy and weird, and then gets married, and then suddenly he's kind of cool and charismatic, really respected, and then suddenly turns to the dark side. Whereas in the Clone Wars, you get to see like all of the middle stuff, how everyone else perceived him, like Anakin is so dramatic. Like, you don't get to see it in Attack of the Clones as much. You do a bit. You get it in Revenge of the Sith to a degree, but like, he's so dramatic in Clone Wars, and it's brilliant. But I was going to ask, like, because one thing that that Tonya's mentioned, and Dave and I have been discussing, and even Megan has picked up on, is there are certain characters from, especially Rebels, Sabine, Hera, and let's say Ahsoka, even though she started in Clone Wars. They're the 3 main characters in this show, which have translated to live action. We saw Ahsoka and Mando and Boba Fett, and we've already discussed her quite a bit, so put it to one side. You got Sabine and Hera. Now, for me, I find that Sabine works fine. It's not perfect, but I think it works. And I think that I've not really had an issue with connecting with Natasha Bordozzo's her portrayal of Sabine. I think that matches in with the animation one. I'm fine with that. Hera is the one which I think a lot of us are having the most difficulty with, because I love Mary Elizabeth Winstead. You know, she was one of my main crushes for a long time. Not just because of she's gorgeous, but also she's an incredible actress. She's a really interesting person outside of acting. She's got like an album out that I try and mention every possible moment I can, which is called Gotta Girl. And it's really, really cool. It's quite different. But like, it's mainly since Gotta Girl that I kind of had a thing for her, because I was like, oh my god, she acts in films like Scott Pilgrim that I like, and also she makes music. Sign me up. Mary Elizabeth, who's no interest in me or even close to me in any way, and I'm engaged, sorry. But like, I was most excited for her. You know, Megan knows my opinions on Mary Elizabeth Winstead, but like, I was so excited for her coming on board, and she's in real life married to Ewan McGregor, which is a fun little Star Wars connection thing there. A lot of people don't know that Ewan McGregor is the nephew of Dennis Lawson, who plays Wedge Antilles as well, so it's lots of fun little connections there. But I don't know if it's Mary Elizabeth Winstead, I don't know if it's Dave Filoni's direction, or I don't know if it's all planned and that Hera, it's been 10 years since we saw Hera in Rebels. She's now a mum. She lost someone very close to her. She's been through not only the 4 years of Rebels that we saw, the year or two before Rebels that we saw when she got Sabine and Zeb on board, fighting in or involved in the Ryloth Clone Wars battles, which you get to see her dad, Cham Syndulla, in the Clone Wars, and then in another animated property, you get to see her post-Clone Wars as well. So her entire life, she's been either oppressed by the Separatists or by the Empire, or by, you know, while in the midst of the Galactic Civil War, trying to keep a family together and raise a child. Like, I don't know if it's just she's become more battle-hardened, but for me and for Dave, and I believe Tonya as well, we feel like she doesn't feel very warm. Like, Hera means mother. I believe, you know, the Greek mythology, Hera is essentially kind of the mother of the gods, you know. But it's like, not really, but I'm trying to be in layman's terms without delving into a huge description of Greek mythology. But Hera, the name means mother. It's a very quite a common thing. So it's like, she is the mother of the Rebels crew. That's how it works, you know, that's the dynamic there. And she's very warm as a person. She's very strong and she's very hardened, but she's very warm. And in this episode, I got it more, because you got the interaction with her and Jason, but I'm still, for me, she's the main character that I'm not connecting with as much as I have been with the other characters. I wonder if I've seen other people online disagree with that point, so it's completely subjective, but I don't know, what is your opinion of both Hera and Sabine, their live action roles, and then we'll start to wrap up.
Right, Sabine, I think it's working. I would like if she kept changing the colour of her hair every now and again. That would be quite a nice little thing. But I think it's working. I buy that she's Sabine. I couldn't think of anyone else. I'd really have to kind of have a look. But I buy the fact that she's Sabine. It works. I don't mind that. I've seen that you've said about Hera before. Everything that you mentioned there, I think, is why she is the way that she is. Mm-hmm. She had a family. She built this family up. She had Ezra, Sabine, you know, Canon, Zeb, Chopper. Then her family got ripped away from her, and she's been left now just with her son. You know, everyone else is kind of. I mean, Chopper's still there. Don't know if that's a help or not, but She has lost the most out of everybody, and that really. I know everyone's mourning the loss of Ezra, but she lost her husband. Well, they wasn't married, but you know, she lost Canon. She doesn't care anymore to a certain degree like she did. She hasn't got that driving force that she used to have, because it's all been taken away from her. So there is that kind of hardened. I'm doing this because it's the right thing, but I don't want to. I don't want to do this because, you know, I'm struggling to, other than my son, I'm struggling to find the reason to kind of keep doing this. But this is all I know. There isn't anything else that I do know. So I'm going through the motions, but I am kind of, I think if we do see Ezra, if they do rescue Ezra and he comes into it, we will see a change. I think she will change, and she will go back to, well, to a certain degree, the way that we saw before, and she'll warm up. But I think at this moment now, when she interacted with Jason, there was a difference. I felt that she was the mother again, but around everybody else, I think she's kind of keeping everybody at an arm's length because she doesn't want to care for anyone else. She's doing what she has to do because this is now her life. But she is that hard, and she's just, as I say, with Jason, there was a difference, and there was a lightness and a smile in her face, and I think she does a really good job of being her. Fair enough, it's makeup and they can kind of do all that, but she does look like her, and she does come across as her, but as kind of a cold version, because she's that thing of, it's a struggle now of, there's nothing else I know, so I've got to do this, and it's for the greater good, but her heart's not in it. That's how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I changed your mind, maybe I don't.
No, I do. I completely understand. I definitely found on this episode I have connected with her more, and I hadn't thought specifically about her interaction with Jason, but I think you're right. I think that's probably a key factor, seeing the smile. I think that is a part of it, and I think you're right. When she interacts with Ezra again, as long as under good circumstances, I think it may be a thing again. And I think that she, at the moment she's kind of at the fringe because she's there by hologram. She obviously went to the Republic shipyards with Ahsoka, but
she's the link between everybody, though.
Yeah.
Which is what she was in Rebels, to be fair.
Exactly. But she was there a lot of the time, I think, was the difference. Whereas at the moment, although she was there at the Krellin shipyard, because the New Republic, she's like, I don't want to overstep. But I think when things start to get worse, clearly, or Ahsoka and Sabine ask for her help, or like, right, we're going to the unknown regions or whatever, we're going to sneak onto the Eye of Zion. It's now or never, Hera. You have to join us or you don't. And she's going to be like, I'll be there. And I think when you get the interaction with all of them there for a bit more time, you will see that mother part come out. So I think you've made some very good points there, and I think we'll have to just see how it turns out for the rest of the episodes, really. I mean, I'm a stickler, and this is what I think what every fan wants, but I don't think it's necessarily a reasonable thing to ask of someone. But like me personally, I'd be like, right, before any of you are moving on screen, you need to watch every episode of Star Wars Rebels, or bare minimum, I'm going to set your homework, the best Hera episodes, the best Sabine episodes, and then the big episodes of it. You need to watch them to have an idea of what your character's going through. I don't know if they've done that. I'm not saying someone can only be a good actor if they've consumed all the source material, because that would mean anytime you act in a horror film, especially like Nightmare or the Saw franchise or anything like that, you need to have watched a stupid amount of films. And Star Wars has a lot of content. So it's an unrealistic request to a degree, but I'd just be interested to know if they ever say to people, yeah, you should do this. Because I know that I think Ewan McGregor read John Jackson Miller's Kenobi novel, which is a Legends novel that I personally haven't read. But I know he read that, and he mentioned it before Kenobi was a series. He kind of read that as a degree of getting more content for Kenobi. I know that Hayden Christensen has watched at least some of the Clone Wars to see what Anakin was like in the Clone Wars. So I like that. But I don't know if those things are kind of Disney going, you're going to be in this thing that's coming up. You should watch just these few, get an idea. Or if Disney are like, I don't care, just be a good actor. And then, you know what I mean? Like, I can't imagine if DiCaprio got a role, he would then spend weeks watching. I know DiCaprio is probably never going to be in Star Wars, but like, I couldn't see someone like DiCaprio or Brad Pitt or some of these heavy hitting actors doing something to that degree just to make fans happy. I feel like if you just told them, look, the character is XYZ, so they need to be like XYZ. In theory, if the director's good enough, the script works, and the person is receptive enough, you could get the right acting performance. But I'm just curious. I'm just trying to force everyone to watch Rebels, even the actors.
Yeah. I do, although, well, you could disagree with Chris. With Dave, actually. He slated us a little bit the other day. They made the comeback on the Comics in Motion.
Yes, the Dr. Mordred one. I have yet to listen to it.
Yeah. Well, he slates us a little bit there. Dave, bit of a turncoat there. He tells Chris that he doesn't need to watch Rebels to watch Ahsoka.
Oh, I mean, to be fair, I think a lot of people have been trying to say that to people, mainly to make it so they don't have to watch 4 seasons of animation. So
yeah, I mean, what Dave should have done is says you don't need to watch Rebels, but you should really listen to these podcasts that we talk about it.
Yes, that would have been nice.
That's what he should have done.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I mean, I wonder whether she has maybe watched these, because with her being married to Ewan McGregor, Star Wars is kind of in the family, I suppose. So maybe it's contents they have actually already seen. But I don't think she does a bad job. I kind of see the fact that she, especially in this episode, when she does have that interaction with her son, the change in her. And that, I mean, even when she mentions, yeah, he's probably around here somewhere with Chopper getting up to no good. There's a likeness. When she talks about him and when she interacts with him, there's a likeness to her. But when she talks to anybody else, it's like when she comes out of there and she talks to First Officer Hawkins, and he's like, "Well, that could have gone better." And she's like, "Well, yeah, and she's very brash, she's very offish." And then Jason appears and she changes, and it's in her smile, it's in her eyes. There's a lot of face acting there that kind of gives you that. This is the Hera that looked after everybody else. So maybe we'll see more. But I don't think she's going to play major roles. I think you say that maybe they will ask us to come and help them. Now, this could go one of two ways. One, she could turn up and go, "Yeah, I'm going to be there. I'll come and help you guys." And we may get Zeb. She may call the big boys in. But there again, she's got a son to think about as well. So her charging up to maybe having to face Thrawn, and that's going to put her in danger. And although these are her friends, she's got a son to think about as well. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I think she's in a really awkward situation because, yeah, like I said, she's going through the motions and she knows the seriousness of what could happen. But at the same point, she's lost a big part of family. She don't want to lose another part now or lose herself. So then her son grows up without her. It's a horrible situation to be in.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
The one thing I will say, the one thing that we did see him right at the end, Balen. I wish we'd had a bit more, because I think he is going to turn to, unfortunately, Ray Stevenson's, he passed away this year, but I do feel that he could be something building for the next few episodes. I think his presence on screen, he just looks menacing, and that in the armor, the kind of with the cloak on, he just looks scary. At the same point, when he does talk, you do kind of feel a little bit at ease with him, which is a bit scary. The fact that he can make you feel a bit, oh yeah, actually maybe this guy's all right.
I mean, I have said that they're my favorite parts of the show so far. I mean, in this episode, they definitely took a back seat. I mean, Shin came a bit more into it because you got to see her being a starfighter pilot. But as you say, Baden Skull was barely in it. But I'm from the premiere, they were the two characters I was the most intrigued by, and I was like, oh. What are their story? I want a flashback episode with them. I want to see how they survived Order 66. What happened to them? How, any of these elements that we know about, I'm just like, I want more of them, if anything. That's the Thrawn stuff I'm interested by, but I loosely know where it's going because, well, Thrawn's not about in the sequel trilogy, but not the Bane and Skull and Shin Hati are too, but they're such, in the scheme of the galactic events, these two people, if they survived this scrap and went off to a random planet and did their own thing, it wouldn't have an effect on galactic events, whereas Thrawn would, so we kind of know what's going to happen to Thrawn, where we don't know what's going to happen with them.
You see, with Balen and that, yeah. Now, Dave did mention the Ahsoka, when we kind of talked about the trailer, that he wonders whether someone kind of survives from Order 66. At first, I think they were saying about it could be Shin. In the previous episodes, that I think it's alluded to that it's Balen that's the one who's, because it's his lightsaber. They say that they recognise from Order 66, from the younglings.
Yeah, I think Shin's too is almost
She's
certainly
too young, isn't
unless
she?
she was like unless he escaped Order 66 as a Padawan or just a Jedi and grabbed like a youngling or someone, because she is. I think she seems to be only about 17. That's the vibes I get, maybe 16, 17. Padawans are usually between sort of 12, 14-ish up to 25. Like Obi-Wan Kenobi was 25 in Phantom Menace. So she's definitely not older than that. And so if you rein it back, the Clone Wars were 28-ish years. The Clone Wars ended about 28 years.
She's not old enough then.
No, she wouldn't be about, because obviously the Clone Wars ends in Revenge of the Sith, and then immediately after that, Order 66 happens. So I'm highly doubtful she's 28, or even if she was. Whereas him, minus 28 years.
It would fit. How about this then for a theory? Now, you mentioned last time about Skull and Hattie being the wolves from Norse mythology.
Yeah.
How about Shin is his daughter?
I mean, that would he could be a Jedi,
kind
disappeared in...
Yeah.
Yeah? You go ahead with your theory.
And that's because, I mean, they're both kind. I mean, I know he's greying, but you could kind of say that they're kind of the same hair. She's very rash. She's very kind of she kind of looks to him for approval, but that kind of, I've seen it many times with my kids. That teenager, I'm going to do what I want to. Sorry, I'm going to do what I want to do, kind of thing. She has that look of, right, I know you're in charge. I know she does, but. And it's that petulant teenager kind of thing. And just from the first two episodes, I kind of thought it comes off that she's, yes, he may be a master, so maybe she's looking for approval that way. But also, if that's her dad, and she's trying to, and she's also knowing that Ahsoka is the reason that it put her dad in danger in a way. Well, Anakin did, but Ahsoka was trained by Anakin, so. We can't get at Vader, because at this point Vader's no more, is he? No.
He's been gone for about 5 years.
The next best thing would be Ahsoka let's mop up all these people that was, in there. So that's what I thought. I wonder whether they could be
very interesting.
father and daughter.
I hadn't thought about that, but given the timeline, it would make sense. There were Jedi that after Order 66, they hid and survived and started families to be incognito. Eth Koth did it, in fact. Vader did find him eventually, I'm afraid to say, but it did happen. Palpatine was always about harvesting Force-sensitive children as well. But, yeah, I think that,
maybe even if Balon hid away and did start up a family and he had Shin, and maybe his wife got taken out through the Jedi, maybe something like that.
And even the Rebellion. They could be hiding on some random world. The Rebellion come in, and then he kind of gets mad, goes off with Shin, decides to train him, and then Thrawn gets his hands on them, and it's like, you could really help here. It's very interesting. I want more from them. That's the main thing. I'm interested by Ahsoka and Sabine, but unfortunately, because Filoni announced he has a movie coming out, and it's going to tie in with the Mandoverse, I can't see that any of these things are really going to be fully tied up by the end of the series. I think it's all just going to feed into like an Avengers movie, which is fine, but it does.
Yeah,
I find knowing that weakens
the bad guys. Yeah, I mean the bad guys sometimes are more interesting, and they're the stories. And the thing is, unfortunately, a lot of times with the bad guys, we only get a short time because they get either killed or defeated somewhere, and that's the end of the story. Where the heroes carry on.
Yeah.
So, and I've been known, obviously, this series passed away. I'm assuming they may have tied that into this. Obviously, they want where we're going to pass away, but maybe that's something they can tie into this, and then that sets Shin up completely over the edge, and goes because when she fought Sabine, she played around with Sabine an awful lot. She could have easily taken her out. I don't know whether she could take Ahsoka on, and Ahsoka's a hardened warrior now. But I do think that maybe she's that kind of. They're going to push her too far, and she's really going to turn. And maybe, as I said, I think Balon could be a dad.
Very interesting
which
theory.
gives us a better reason why they're kind of together.
There's a very interesting theory I had thought of, and it's got a lot to think about. It's annoying that today is only Wednesday. I have to wait another week and it's going to be after work next week as well. I don't get to watch it till. But I think we've tackled basically everything and then some with this episode and the last two. We've spoken a lot. For an episode that's 30 minutes, we've spoken for 4 times longer than the episode is, which is good. I love that. It's one of the reasons I love these shows, and I hope we've given people information about a variety of trivia things, our theories and thoughts and etc. So it's really, really good conversation. Thank you, Maff. So why don't you tell people what you've been up to and stuff? I'll put links in the description as I always do. But have you recorded any other pods recently? Let us know.
I recorded with I'm Jack's Musing. I think it's going to get released on. Does this get released on the weekend?
I'll be releasing this. When we finish this call, I'm going to try and edit and try and release it tonight/tomorrow morning. So this will be released. I'm hoping it does this, otherwise I'll sound like a right fool. But August 31st, this should be out.
Right.
So is this coming out in the next few days?
I think Jax releases his back to filmography on Friday the 1st.
Yeah.
So I'll be reviewing 13 with Jackson. We get into a bit of a discussion there about that, of who likes it and who doesn't like it. And that's that's quite it's an interesting film.
Well, don't say anything else about it. We save it for the pod, because I'm going to put the link to that in the description, and I'm definitely going to listen because I love Back to the Filmography. Is there anything else you've been on semi-recently?
There's also, I think, further into September, I'll be on with Spider Dan. We discussed the medical professions, top 5 worst medical professions. So that's cool, but I think that's going to be near the back end of September, I think he said. You just have to listen to Spider Dan anyway, and that is very good. And that he does cover some weird, strange subjects, but they are, they're interesting to listen to. Unless if you see Necromantic, don't listen to that one.
No, well, listen to that pod, but don't watch the film. I'd say, for all the listeners out there and everyone watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you check out my playlists. I've had loads of Star Wars conversations we've done, as Matt's been on before. We've done Mandalorian discussion shows, Andor discussion shows, Book of Boba Fett discussion shows, Kenobi discussion shows, or Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obviously, Ahsoka will be doing future live action series, a Skeleton Crew coming out, Mando Series 4, and Acolyte, which I'm very hyped for. All those things. I've done Star Wars interviews as well. So I've spoken to Cavan Scott, Claudia Gray, Kevin Shinnick, George Mann, all of whom have written Star Wars books that are in the canon as well. So really, really great conversations there, and loads of other conversations about Star Wars as well. I've had tons of conversations, nothing to do with Star Wars whatsoever, which is Genuine Chit-Chat, my main interview podcast. It's been going on for 6 years, so that's pretty mental. So check out the playlists on YouTube if you're there. I've got my Star Wars Comics and Canon show, so you never have to have read a single Star Wars comic in your entire life. You never have to have read a Star Wars book, just seen the main films, and that's all you need to start your journey. I go through the plot details of comics that I'm tackling, and so you don't have to read the comic or anything like that. And then along the way, while I'm giving you the plot details of each comic, I'm then also giving additional information on trivia, species, certain things I've been doing here. Oh, this character popped up. Well, you will know them from blah, 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 and all those kind of things. It's a perfect way to get updated with the Star Wars canon, especially from the comics perspective, because a lot of people don't read the comics. And as I said, never have to read a comic in your entire life. You just tune into the episode, and I do all the hard work for you. And my goal is to try and get more people into the comics, but also I understand not everyone can get into all the comics. So it's meant to be kind of partly, a kind of a substitute to a degree, but you also get a wider understanding of the Star Wars canon. I also do a lot of book reviews on there as well. I've tackled every single piece of the High Republic, apart from 3 pieces of Phase 2 content, which I am currently working on, and then I'll be fully up to date with Star Wars content in the High Republic as well. And so loads of great ways to listen to me waffle on into your ear even more. But subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/genuine chit-chat if you're not already watching there. Follow me on social media at genuine chit-chat on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and also TikTok as well. And also follow the podcast feed of Comics in Motion and the podcast feed of Genuine Chit-Chat. You can keep up to date with Maff as well, because he didn't mention his own Twitter handle, which is at MaffUK78. So I'll put that in the description too. I know off by heart, Maff, because I love you. And so it's one of those, and myself and Maff and Dave have done Rebels Reviewed. So if you want to know more about Star Wars Rebels, we've done 5 episodes on those. And then we will be planning, as we've mentioned in this conversation, to do a Clone Wars watch. We've got a few potential names for that, but we're aiming to watch the Clone Wars movie before the end of 2023 and then kickstart 2024 with an episode of the Clone Wars show that we're going to be doing probably once a month, tackling a handful of Clone Wars episodes. But we'll get into all of that when we're done with Ahsoka, because we're still watching Ahsoka stuff. But loads of great ways to get into contact with myself, great ways to get into contact with Maff and listen to all the crazy things that he's been up to as well. And also you can subscribe to the Pop Culture Collective, that's pccnewsletter.com, completely free, but you get a weekly email from that, and then you get updates with what I'm doing, what Spider-Dan's doing, what Comics in Motion's doing, the Femon Collective, loads of people, just one email, everything in one easy place. But friends, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, Maff, thank you for joining me. It's always an absolute delight speaking with you. And we'll speak in the future about Star Wars, no doubt, on air as well. And to everyone who's listening out there, please make sure you subscribe, share with your friends, rate, review, all that usual jazz. And you can support me on Patreon and on Ko-fi if you desire. And if you do, you get bonus episodes from me too. So please consider doing that. But that's enough from us. And so we'll talk to you next week. I'll have another wonderful guest to speak with about Ahsoka. And so there's nothing else to say apart from, may the Force be with you.